So I mentioned earlier you were one of the early definitive personalities in Ring of Honor. And there was a time period where that company looked like it was about to fall apart. And you and Samoa Joe walked into a ring in Dayton, Ohio, and you did a 60-minute match. And the narrative, it was awesome. The narrative immediately went from ROH is doomed to ROH is great. And you went on to do a trilogy of matches with Joe, one in Chicago, the final one in New Jersey. Those matches don't get talked about or celebrated as much as some of the other stuff that you've done. Obviously, the WWE stuff was on a bigger scale. Talk a little bit about those matches and the mindset of walking in knowing you've got this company in your back and you've got to try and fix it and make it better.
I don't know if we ever approached it like that. I really don't.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think me and Joe were like, well, this is it. I think we were just like, fuck it. Let's just go have fun and, let's tell a cool story. I really want to use the headlock a lot. And Joe, was just like, great, whatever. I don't think we put pressure on ourselves in that regard. I just think it's like kind of like next man up thing. There was a group of guys who worked for TNA. I was one of them. We worked for ROH, and I remember we all had a bit of a meeting, and we were like, we can't let TNA tell us who we can and can't work for, and we all were like, yeah, gung ho, let's do it. And then the next day, so and so cancels off Ring of Honor, so and so cancels off Ring of Honor, so and so cancels off Ring of Honor, and Gabe looked at me and he's like, you're canceling, and I was like, no, I just can't operate that way. Like, TNA told me you can't work for them, and I was just like, I can. Like, yeah, I'm an independent contractor, right? Like, no, but you have a contract with us. And I was just like, all right, but it doesn't say you can't prevent me from working anywhere. So, a bunch of other guys said they were going to stay, and they left. I stayed, and then, like I said, it was like a next man up thing. It's what happens in sports teams. So-and-so gets traded, so-and-so retires. It's the next guy up, and I was like the next guy up. I don't know if Gabe ever looked at me like I was, one of the main guys or whatever, but he kind of had to at that point. There was, like I said, there was nobody left, and I wasn't supposed to wrestle Joe. And I'm the one who floated the idea of a 60-minute draw because I was just basically like, well, if Joe just beats me, then he just beats me and there's nowhere else to go. Who's he going to work with next? So I think the idea of the trilogy came based out of that. And it was almost out of necessity. But I don't know if me and Joe ever approached it like we were saving anything. We were just maybe thankfully too young and naive to realize that, like, if we shit the bed, that it probably wasn't going to be in a Ring of Honor anymore.
I feel like you and Joe had like one of the most celebrated wrestling bromances in that time period. You guys were like peanut butter and jelly. It just seemed like it was like one of those matches and one of those clicking of personalities that worked. I don't know how close you are to him anymore. I don't know if you still follow what he's doing, but what are your memories of working with Joe? Because I don't think you guys would have had success, but I don't think you would have had success the same way that you did if it hadn't been for that rivalry and that friendship.
I think the rivalry had success just because of ideas. I looked around. I would always look around at the locker room and like the landscape, and I would always be like, okay, what's missing? What's nobody doing? What's everybody doing? I'm going to try to do the opposite of that. And I don't take credit for anything. I think those who were there know like who did what, who's responsible for whatever it is. I think you can see my fingerprints all over stuff. There was a rash of 60-minute draws after all that, and like I apologize for that. But I loved working with Joe just because it was one of those things that it was easy. It wasn't always necessarily not difficult, if that makes sense. But working with Joe was easy. But the dude would beat the shit out of you, So not that was a bad thing. That was just kind of like the style we worked. And he was a bigger dude that I felt like I'm not the smallest guy, but I'm not the biggest either. But I could get away with doing more with him because he was a bigger guy and he was a better base. And I think that's another thing that made the matches so much different, is because it was believable that I could stand up to Joe because he's not, 390 pounds, but there wasn't such a drastic like Rey Mysterio-esque size difference. working with Joe's a peach, you know. Hopefully, whatever he's doing now is fun and good, and I hope he's happy.